I wanted to just speculate on something, if I may. I'm not a journalist, so that explains why I want to do that. Excuse me, the sun is kind of bright over there, so if I'm squinting, my apologies. I wanted to just speculate that I feel like and I've thought this for a little while, that this might have been some sort of planned operation with some agent provocateurs in Hamas. I was watching Alexander Makuris today. I haven't seen all the coverage about this, but I sort of felt like whoever was in Hamas would have known that this would have been, Israel does not need an excuse to bomb Palestinians. They just do it anyway. And so they would have known before they conducted this attack that this was going to lead to some kind of all-out, genocidal situation in Gaza. Because, Bibi Netanyahu does not need any excuse. And, I mean, the Israeli government is in an apartheid state. It's much worse than an apartheid state. A little kitten knocked down the flag. Anyway, it's much worse than an apartheid state. And so they would have known, that the politicians in the Knesset would be right on board with any excuse if it was some agent provocateurs in Hamas that were working with the Israeli government to sort of like set up a sort of a catalyst for a wider scale invasion, which the US would like to bomb Iran and Israel would like to bomb Iran. And at the same time, the genocide to the population in Gaza, then that may have been something that was there in this attack, sort of ambitions by maybe someone, who was from Assad, or who knows, I don't know. But I just get this feeling when it happened that they must have known that it was going to turn into a massive retribution and revenge campaign by the Israeli government. So, and then there's the other way of looking at it, that yes, they would have known, Hamas would have known that there was going to be a very huge revenge response from the Israeli government, and maybe they had sort of secret discussions with Hezbollah and Iran and who knows else, some other neighboring countries, and sort of said that the situation in Gaza had reached a point that was completely untenable, and they didn't want to just die a slow death, as they have been dying a slow death in Gaza for at least 17 years since the blockade started, but of course since the Nakba in 1948. And so they, maybe they just thought this is the only choice they have left. They've tried the non-violent thing of the Great March of Return, and they were, shot down, assassinated, the, journalists and paramedics, and, children shot and killed or maimed intentionally, and all of that. And so they just thought, well, unfortunately, that we're going to have to resort to violence. But, the fact that there was nobody at the fence when Hamas broke through the boundary. And I've, heard somebody who was in the IDF who said that, even 20 years ago or 25 years ago, they could tell when a cat was walking by that area. That's before all the internet and all that kind of thing. I think it was over probably over around 25 years ago, that it was, they had that ability to sort of know any small animal that was walking by. So surely they would have been able to, sort of recognize that it was people going over a fence with little propellers and all of that. So if that was the case, and also I think they had moved troops away from that area to another area. So it was all sort of, it seemed like it was all kind of set up to allow this attack to happen, so that then they could respond with this genocidal response. And like I say, I'm not a journalist, and I'm just speculating. So I just sort of feel like, and I thought this at the time when it happened, I just thought, wow, I mean, when I saw the Hamas going over the wires with these propellers, and I was thinking, where is the IDF? Where are they? And it was right out of like a Hollywood movie kind of thing, them going over the fence. I just thought it just didn't seem possible to. You obviously would have had to bring I know it was early in the morning, but still, you have to bring the little propeller vehicles there, and then sort of take off. You have to have a camera person there and everything. Surely there was somebody, or some sort of surveillance system there that would have seen all of that, and would have been halted or, worse. So it just sort of seemed like something like that, a setup, sort of a false flag kind of a thing. with some sort of an insider, Israeli insider in Hamas, or somebody who has done a deal with the Israeli government in Hamas, or something like that. It just seemed too easy to have such a very dramatic kind of Mission Impossible type thing happening at that time. Particularly since, it must have taken forever to get those parts to those propellers and everything through the tunnels. I didn't even know how they got that kind of thing inside, through these tunnels even. Must have taken forever. So that was all, for me, kind of suspect, even though it was kind of very amazing to see. It was very suspect. So if that's the case, that Israel had done some sort of a deal with somebody, a agent provocateur in Hamas, and that, they actually moved any surveillance away from that area so that that attack from Hamas could have occurred, then what was the wider aims of that? And I think we're seeing that unfolding with the, the U.S. fleets in the Mediterranean. And I feel like this is some sort of a coordinated thing that was planned out. Now, it could be the case that Hamas had sort of had talked to Iran and Hezbollah and all of that, and said that they had to do this because it was just, life was completely untenable anymore, and they felt like now that Bibi Netanyahu was back in office, that he was going to do his best to genocide the population of Gaza, the 2.4 population, half of which are children. And so that Hamas decided it was now or never, we're going to have to do something, knowing full well that there was going to be a tremendous response, because they don't need any sort of excuse to bomb people in Gaza, Palestinians. And so they had said that they were going to do this, and told Iran and Hezbollah and all of that. And so, there was some sort of coordination there that might, if it escalated, which of course it would, and it is being escalated, that there could be some sort of assistance in that, so that they didn't genocide the population, just because I feel like that is definitely with the approval of the US, Israel is intending to wipe out Gaza. That's very clear, and they don't even care what the public think. They don't care what the wider world thinks of that either. So that is very dangerous, and the US is given a rubber stamp, and not only that, but is going to protect them while they do it, which means that there could be an all-out sort of a thing against Iran, because the US has always wanted to bomb Iran, and there are lots of resources in Iran, including oil, and so they would probably very much like to get the US, as usual, looting and pillaging and bombing. They would like to get their hands on the resources in Iran. And also, bomb Lebanon, they'd like to do that. So it's a sort of a tit-for-tat thing. Israel gets to wipe out Gaza, and the US get to bomb Iran and steal their resources. So it's like, it's like a coordinated, worse than the mafia kind of an effort between the US and Israel. And, to anybody who isn't aware of how corrupt the US empire is, how it's the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, they might think what I'm saying is kind of just over the top and ridiculous. But if anyone has any idea, if they have read books by William Bloom or anybody about US imperialism, then they would know that the US intends to have full spectrum dominance, and they can see that they're losing power. It's becoming a multipolar world, and they are desperately, like the Roman Empire was overstretched and in collapse. That's what's happening to the US, and they've become incredibly dangerous in trying to hang on to and maintain a unipolar world. But that's not really possible anymore, and that's where it is very dangerous, where, they really are in overstretch and collapse. They're feeding all their old weapons in Ukraine, getting rid of all their old weapons so they can say to the public, we need to fill our stockpiles of new technology from Raytheon. And of course the weapons industry is rubbing their hands together, and their stocks are gone up. They're as happy as can be. And also they need a new war, because Ukraine is kind of, they're getting to the point where the US can't even really pretend that, it's limping along, it's in its last legs, and it has been for some time, but all the propaganda from the mainstream media has put out that Ukraine is winning, or that they're brave and wonderful and all this sort of stuff, but they're being slaughtered like by the hundreds of thousands in Ukraine. And of course Russia is suffering terrible losses, and of course the US, as usual, is trying to has been interfering with peace talks between Russia and Ukraine since the beginning, since a year ago. That they're doing the same. When Brazil was trying to create some kind of a peace talk, ceasefire with Gaza and with Israel and Gaza, the US were interfering with that as well. So they are the greatest purveyor of violence, overthrowing or attempting to overthrow 60-plus countries' governments since World War II. And the terrible carnage, 20 million plus people killed due to US imperialism, that's probably an underestimate. And hundreds of millions displaced. So this is all part of that. I don't know what they think. I think they might underestimate that the world, there's a lot of countries now, even within the Pentagon, I think, or in the government, there is it's divided on how they feel about this Israel being, the ally to the US, and this extreme sort of ripping the mask off that the US and Israel are doing. Just, it's sort of very clear to people, I think, except for ideologues, it's very clear to a lot of people in the world that this is a genocide, and that it's a complete, well, to say it's an over-response is definitely, that's an understatement, but it's obviously an excuse to bomb hospitals and schools and to murder most of the population in Gaza. So that's I think becoming apparent to people. I've noticed a change online. The ideologues and the Zionist supporters and stuff will always say the same things, and there's plenty of those. Lots of celebrities are pathetic and don't have any sort of courage to stand up against anything. They want their careers more than they want to end a genocide. But there are a lot of people apart from those Zionist supporters that are waking up to the fact of what has been going on for Palestinians in apartheid Israel, worse than apartheid Israel, since the Nakba, since 75 years ago. And hopefully they'll do some research into independent journalism to find out really what's going on. They're certainly not going to get it through the corporate media. I don't know. I've been out with Didi about 3 times now to do some loudspeaker, megaphone speaking, near crowded places, and with our flag and with talking about this. And I've spoken for a fair while through this megaphone, and hopefully people heard it. And I hope that sort of more people get out and about and protest this, because I don't know how beneficial it's going to be, but one has to do something, because our government here, Australia, is obviously completely a US lackey, so they do whatever the US wants them to do. So they're not going to condemn Israel. They're not going to acknowledge there's an apartheid state there and all of that. So it's always been the case that grassroots movements are the things that help end and spread education about these issues. So we have to do what we can in a grassroots way to address this genocide. Iran has threatened Israel that there's going to be a earthquake of a response. I don't know if that's going to happen, because the minute, of course, Iran tries to stop this genocide in Gaza, the US is going to start bombing Iran to the Stone Age, just like Israel's doing to Gaza, because that's what they want to do. They want to go in there, they want to make Iran like Ukraine, a destroyed country, and then they want to take their resources. So this is a tit-for-tat thing going on here, I think. I think that's pretty clear if you have any understanding at all, which a lot of people who watch this channel do, any understanding at all of what the US is like and their aims, then it's probably pretty clear to you that this is some sort of coordinated thing and a tit-for-tat, because Israel has always been a proxy for the US in Western Asia. And as Biden said a few decades ago, there's a speech where he says, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to create one. And that sort of says it all. Basically, they are the proxy force for the US, continually interfering with Syria, occupying the Golan Heights. There's sort of a lot of, sort of shared intelligence, so that the US can do their worst in Western Asia and reduce countries to a shambles, and then sort of manage chaos, and they can take their resources. Well, this is just more of that, except that Iran is not like Iraq. Iran is not like Afghanistan. Iran has 80 million people. When you take on Iran, you're taking on a lot more than Iran as well. And Hezbollah is quite a fighting force as well, from Lebanon. I think they're from Lebanon, yeah. For Hamas to sort of challenge Israel properly, the Israeli army properly in Gaza, they're going to need help, because apparently Hamas fighters are not, according to some expert who's watched many videos of Hamas, says that they're a bit under par. And of course, the Israeli army is a lot of reservists who are not really, they're not really capable of fighting that kind of war either. So, I mean, that's why Israel is bombing, like the cowards that is the US. they tend to try and bomb the bejesus back to the Stone Age of a country because they don't want to put any troops on the ground. And that's what Israel is doing. So they're probably holding off from going in there because they think that they can just keep bombing, and they're escalating the bombing. And of course, one of the most disgusting things is they told people to go to southern Gaza, and they've been bombing southern Gaza. So basically getting them all to go down there and then bomb them there. I mean, it's so disgusting. And on a personal note, I don't know about you, but this, I feel, I'm in this situation where I'm safe. I feel like anybody in the world who's being oppressed like this, nobody is safe while Palestinians are unsafe. You can see fascism creeping into all sorts of things. Police turning up in the UK to people's places where they're flying Palestinian flags and telling them to take it down, that kind of thing. And all the, not being able to protest against the law to protest and all this kind of stuff. You can see it happening. So when one group, vulnerable group, and I include non-humans, animals in this, I've always likened, when you have speciesism, when you have, hundreds of billions of animals being tortured and killed every year for trivial reasons, and mostly palate pleasure, when we are not vegan and we're allowing this to happen, millions every day being killed, that cannot stop. That kind of violence cannot stop. And you see how, and this is evidence how you hear them talking about Palestinians, calling them animals and stuff. That's what happens when you otherize one group, the largest group on the planet, non-human animals who are sentient beings. That sort of attitude doesn't stop there. I've said this for years, and you can see that right now, how they dehumanize Palestinians, so that and put that propaganda out to the public, put that propaganda out to Israelis, and a lot of Israelis have a genocidal rhetoric towards Palestinians. That's what happens. You put this out, you indoctrinate people about a group, either it's animals, and people are not vegan, and they're fine with torturing and killing hundreds of billions, or you can put it out about a group that you want to have power over and stuff, and we see that throughout history. You put out that they're worse than animals, you put out atrocity propaganda about them, that they're worse than animals, in quotes, that they're, doing all sorts of monstrous things. It's out of the playbook, of US imperialism and Israel to just demonize a group when you're at the same time trying to kill them all, and they're nothing like that. They're just people like you and I, and they're being unbelievably oppressed and treated just so atrociously every day. Here is the US and Israel talking about other targets of their country, the targets of their governments, that is really talking about themselves. They're the ones that are atrocious. They're the ones that are barbaric and savage and all of that. They're the ones that are doing all sorts of hideous things all around the world, but pretending like they're the bastions of all that's good and democracy and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, it's the same, with the Christian fascists, and I put Christians in quotes. They talk about other groups like they're hideous and evil and all this kind of stuff. And really a lot of what's going on within these Christian fascist groups are, there's abusing children and all sorts of things going on behind this, and sort of and warmongery and just full of bigotry and stuff like that. So it's it's just how it is. It's like this projection, projecting onto groups, the shadow kind of thing, as a Jungian sort of, as Jung said, projecting their own shadow onto other groups, and of course it's all about power, patriarchy, and all of that. I don't know about you, but this has been, I find, it reminds me back in 2016 or 2014 when they had the Protective Edge assault on Gaza. And it was so awful, and it went on for 2 weeks, and there was children in the open shop fronts that were in freezers because the morgue was full. 2,000 adults and I think it was 500 children were murdered by the Israeli army. Bombing. And this is the same thing, except there's close to 2,000 children this time. 4,000 people all up, and 14,000 people who are dead. Whoops. And there's 14,000 people who've been wounded so far. And I think if Israel has its way, it'll be a lot more than that. I think we're going to find out that it's a lot more than that, because there's a lot of people under the rubble. But it's going to be so much worse if it isn't stopped, and the US isn't going to stop it. Western governments are not going to stop it. They're complicit in this genocide. My government is complicit. And I think the only way to stop this now is if there is an attack by Iran or Hezbollah, a serious, sort of attack, and a serious war breaks out, an expansion of the war that the US and Israel want. Of course, there's a lot of people in the government who don't want that, but there are the people who are in control, the weapons industry that funds a lot, the weapons industry that, lobbies for all this, the whole thing, they're big corporations probably are looking forward to getting in there, BlackRock and all of that. So it's, it's something I think that it's probably, which is really terrible, beyond tragic for Palestinians. But I think it's going to, if there isn't some sort of military intervention from outside, I think they're just going to continue on murdering Palestinians until there are none, and they'll bomb the bejesus out of them and level Gaza. They've even said they want to level Gaza. They're not secret in their aims. The Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has said, I think this is a direct quote. He said, "Gaza will never be the same. We're going to level Gaza," or something like that. It was that sort of clear. So, anybody who thinks that, I think that this is going to end in some sort of ceasefire, I think doesn't really understand. Well, unless, of course, there's the international pressure is so extreme. But I don't think that they care. They have the most powerful army in the world, the US. I don't know for how long because they're overstretched. But they feel invincible. They have the most powerful army behind them, and they feel invincible. That's the only way they can get away with this, is because they've been getting $10 million plus a day from the US military aid. That's the only way they can, without the US, they wouldn't be able to continue this. So, it's really, it's a case of, I think that it's like this. I think the US is well and truly at this point, I think, biting off way more than they can chew. I think, because I sort of get this feeling that a lot of countries know that if they don't band together to address this monster, the US empire, that they're going to be picked off one by one. That's why I think the BRICS there's more and more countries wanting to join BRICS. There's China is supporting Russia, and they've become closer than ever, Russia and China, because everybody knows that it's just a matter of time before the US empire comes for them. It's been coming for Russia via Ukraine, quite happy to knock off Ukraine and destroy the country in an effort, and of course too cowardly to do it themselves, using Ukraine as a proxy, and they're going to use Taiwan and Australia as a proxy for China, and they're going to use this excuse of Israel is under attack, which of course, if it doesn't stop this genocide in Gaza, which I don't think it is, yes, I think it will be under attack, and they can use that excuse, the US, to bomb Iran to the Stone Age and then take over their resources and all of that, and bomb Lebanon. So, this is sort of like a disaster, really, in the making. It's a disaster for everybody, but of course it's a major disaster for Palestinians. But I feel like at this point this is going to be a World War III, unless some miraculous thing happens and the US decides to back off. But it is going to be World War III, because I think that it's possible. Now, this may be completely too much speculation on, but it is possible that China and Russia just kind of say, look, we're going to have to join in on this, because, it's better if we all are sort of attacking the US than trying to do it by ourselves. Because, as I said, the US intends to have full spectrum dominance, and they want to destroy China, and they want to destroy Russia, and they want to destroy Iran, and on and on. It'll be going in and destroying Brazil and all the Latin American countries, and they want to take over. The only reason Australia is and Australia is going to be used like Ukraine for the thing against China. The idiots we have in government here, they're disgusting. I'm disgusted with the lack of any sort of stand against this genocide. That just tells you everything about this government. And the other side too. The other side is more conservative, but they would be worse, I think. I don't see how you could be worse supporting a genocide, which is obviously a genocide. Anyway, I'll love you and leave you, so thanks so much for watching. I just had to say something. I haven't been posting much on this channel from me as commentary, and I've explained why. You can join on TikTok, where I post snippets of different journalism. I don't really do commentary like I do on here. I sort of feel like snippets from excellent journalists about issues is sort of more beneficial. I get a lot of views on TikTok. I've got about close to 11,000 followers there, and they get to see all the great journalism from independent journalists, particularly about Gaza at the moment. So I feel like that's beneficial, rather than me sort of doing my amateurish commentary. Um, and but I like to touch base with everybody on this channel, even though hardly anybody sees anything. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Let's do what we can to try and address this situation in a grassroots way, because I think that's the only thing that's going to have any sort of difference, although I don't think they care one iota. Governments don't care anymore what the public think. They really don't. That's very clear. I mean, I knew they didn't care when we all marched against the Iraq War. They couldn't care less what people think. I think, the days of pitchforks is probably the only thing left now. Pitchforks, guillotines and stuff. I'm not promoting violence. I'm not for violence. I think it just ends up putting violent people as a replacement for violent people. But at the same time, I think the only language that a lot of Western governments would understand at this point is violence, sadly. And that will probably end up because people will feel so oppressed in the world, as they're starting to feel, particularly with the recession that's coming, that they will, there will be a turning point. I don't know what it will take. You would think in the US there would have been a turning point already because of how little the government cares about them there. But, in Western governments care less and less. They don't care what people think. The only time they might care is when they have this pretense of democracy, when you're voting for them. And then they're all out telling you how much they care. And then the rest of the time they just ignore you. So, voting doesn't really help. But anyway, so thanks for watching. Till next time. I love you. Bye for now.